wanna be educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my loneliness. I guess that ignorance is bliss.
Welcome to Parkstone at Home, a podcast where we talk property, home and living in Queensland, Australia. If you own property or are interested in investing, or if you're like me and are currently renting, then this is a podcast for you. As always, I'm Hayley, Marketing Director, and I'm joined by Elizabeth Jackson, owner of Parkstone Property and local Mackay entrepreneur.
I wish I knew.
Welcome back to Parkstone at Home. So you're back again with Hayley and Elizabeth, and we're just going to chat a little bit more, really try and build on some stuff we talked about in the last episode, and just get into some more nitty-gritty of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So long time no see, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Hey again.
Great to see you. Always love to sit down with you. So I really wanted to dive into some stuff that really applies to tenants in a really personal way, but it does also, it has implications for owners as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the dreaded routine inspections and entry condition reports.
Yeah.
And I know there's so many different opinions about all these things, and you know, if they're really worth doing, or you know, if I know a lot of tenants sort of have this opinion that their bond's going to get taken from them one way or another.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what they do.
Yep.
And so I suppose I wanted to first ask, for people who absolutely don't know, what is an entry condition report? What's it for? What does it involve? And then we can talk about
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So an entry condition report is words and photos and or videos of the exact condition of the property when you take possession. So as a property manager, before all this new technology came in, an entry condition report could take anywhere from 4 to 6 hours and have a minimum of perhaps 800 to 1,000 photos.
Wow.
It's very time consuming, but it is really important to be able to have a record of what that property was like when you took possession. Now, a tenant has a opportunity to add their own comments. So property managers, being only human, we might miss something, and it might be something really big, hopefully not, but if it is, that's where the tenant has the opportunity to add what they see, and then from there, that is what is held on file for when you vacate. We will use that one. So in terms of legislation, a tenant only has 7 days to return that entry condition report. If you don't return it, the original one that we've provided you stands. So it's really important that when you get the keys, you spend that time reading thoroughly what the property manager has written on the entry condition report, and then you can add your own extra bits if there's something that you notice. Because if you don't return that entry condition report and you fail to mention, oh, look, the window was broken, and the property manager hasn't noted it on the report and there's no photos, ultimately there's a very good chance that you'll be responsible for replacing that window, which is a cost you incur. And then ultimately too, that can be an issue for you with future properties, that, there was issues with the vacate, and it's on your record then from the last reference of that property. So it's really, really important to do that. We take the time to do it. But like I said, we may miss something, or if you disagree with something on it, add it on there, because then it shows too, like if we get to the point of a bond refund and you've taken the time to go through it yourself and there's discrepancies or we don't agree on some things, the RTA mediation service for a bond dispute can actually discuss that. And we can come to some kind of agreement in that way. But if you choose not to return your entry condition report, you're basically saying that you agree with what we've written, and everything that's on there is true and correct. And then if there's issues at the end, you can't say to me, oh, but that was there when we moved in. Like, well, it may have been, but you didn't put it on your report. So in my world, doesn't exist.
There.
Yeah. And so it used to be that there was legislation of only 3 days, and that was physically impossible for somebody to do it in that time frame. So now it's 7 days. So when you get the keys, take the time. before you put all your furniture in there, because you see it, and do it in daylight. Don't do it at night time, because lights cast shadows on things and you can't see everything. So as soon as you get those keys, go over there, go through everything, including the outside. So if there's any dents in guttering or window frames are badly weathered, or the lawns are notoriously long, add that on there and take your own photos, because through any entry condition report program, you can add your own comments and photos. I use something called Inspection Express, which provides 360 videos, and then it's all digital. I don't have any paper. I print very rarely in my office, but everything is digital, so you can do it all on your phone. Read what I've written, and then you can write if I've missed something. So super, super important to start with the end in mind with the entry condition report. If something's not clean, because clean is a grey area. What I think is clean might not be what you think is clean. So it's very important to write that down. A good property manager will come back to the property with you and go through any comments that you've added, so then you can both be on the same page. Because if you're saying that it's filthy, but there is a little speck of dirt in a window track, for example, that's not going to fly, because then you can leave that window track filthy.
Yep.
In terms of someone else's eyes.
And technically it was on the entry condition
That's right.
report.
So when you return it, an agent has got, or property manager has got 14 days to address anything on that entry condition report, and a property manager should come back, go through it, take photos, so then there are records of exactly what you're explaining. Because if you're over exaggerating something so that you don't have to clean when you vacate, not gonna be okay. You'll get caught out pretty quickly. But again, not all property managers are created equal, so
Yep.
it will vary. But really important to do those entry condition reports, because what you write on those reports is what we look at when you vacate. And if it comes to QCAT, if we can't decide with RTA mediation, QCAT, a magistrate will look at that report and basically decide for you, and then you have no choice. But if you have to pay compensation, or if you have to pay for things to get cleaned, then that's just what the order will say. And so it's really important with that to definitely return it. Take the time. So it's like with your application, you're doing it with intent, and it shows that you're taking care as well of the property.
Do you think that there's ever like a time when you've had a tenant return an entry condition report and you felt that they were just being like ridiculously pedantic, and you had to go back and kind of be like, no, you're lying?
When I first started, I probably had that a little bit of an opinion about it, but now I look at it that they're just covering themselves. So I do still take the time to go back and say, hey, you've written this, what do you mean? So then I'm on the same page as you. So when you do vacate, we've got that record. And understanding where they're coming from. Most tenants that will do that have had a really bad experience before.
Yes, they've learned from experience.
They learned from that experience. And unfortunately, there's some property managers that have this reputation that they will just take your bond. Even though there's not many things wrong, they will just take it. And that's not fair.
No.
I have an office policy for my office, and I've always had this in other offices I've worked in, that if there are differences, then I will automatically make a claim on your bond, because it just stalls things at the RTA. It means that it just sits there and until we negotiate, until we work out where everything's at. And it just gives me a little bit more time to get quotes, have a chat to you about what's wrong with the property, and then we're all on the same page. Because understandably though, the legislation works in both ways. So a tenant can make an application for their bond.
Like separate from the agent?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Which means the burden of proof is on the agent to prove why they should get some of the bond.
Okay.
On the flip side of that though too, if I make a claim on the bond, the tenant has to prove why they should get their bond back.
Yep.
So there's processes with the RTA for that whole experience, but it is there to be used as a service. It's not the be-all and end-all. I use that for a little bit more of time for me to get everything together, But when I get the quotes together for cleaning or damages or, mowing the lawns, things like that, all of those things are sent to you anyway as the tenant. So then you are across the same information that I have. So then you can make an informed decision about whether you agree with what we're saying or if you completely disagree, which is okay. And then we talk about it more with a mediator if we can't come to an agreement. But yeah, so it all comes back to that entry condition report. So important. But unfortunately, yes, when it comes to the end, if it's not clear, or the other thing is too, if there's been change of property managers in the time that you've been at the property, not necessarily all that information that you've spoken to that original property manager, that doesn't get handed over, not necessarily kept on file. So it's really important then that if a property manager comes to your property and wants to chat to you about what you've put on your entry condition report, is that there is a follow-up email saying, I came to your house on this day, we went through these things and we agree that, yes, there's a broken window and it's noted now, we have a photo attached, so that there's a paper trail for you as well. Because, unfortunately, property management is a high turnover industry where you can have, sometimes in a 12-month period, you can have 4 different property managers, which is no fault of yours as a tenant. But it's also making sure that you cover yourself. So any tenant now that, sends back an entry condition report with a lot of comments, I look at that and go, they've had a bad experience. But yes, it's great because then I can come and talk to you about it and we can get on the same page. And then it avoids confrontation at the end.
Yes.
Minimises that,
Yeah. Do you think that there's any areas of any given property that a tenant wouldn't perhaps think of to put on the entry condition report that you could think of as advice?
Outside.
Yep.
Definitely on the outside. So whether it's, the TV area was bent or if, there's damage to guttering, because sometimes you don't look up.
No.
You just assume everything's fine up there, which we shouldn't assume. But and even little things like garden beds, there might be a couple of weeds. Okay. But then if it says it's weedy, technically then you can not weed the garden bed at all and you can leave it weedy.
How it was.
Yeah. So unfortunately, though, with my system now, because it's a 360 video, it shows everything and you can zoom in and it doesn't pixelate. So saying that, it's weedy, if there's 2 weeds, I'm going to correct that and say there are
There's
2 weeds. and here is a picture of those 2 weeds so that there is reference and comparison at the end. Because if I come back and that garden bed is filled with weeds, it's not going to fly. I'm going to get you to either weed it yourself or I'm going to ask a tradie, which is going to cost you more. So it's really important to be very thorough and clear on the entry condition report so that it's straightforward when you do vacate.
It's so interesting too because I think coming from a tenant, I mean you're a tenant too, but I guess a young tenant, I think as much as we all want to sort of be really good people and, above the line and stuff, I think the temptation is so strong to put things a little bit exaggerated to kind of give yourself a bit of a safety net.
A little bit of leeway.
Yeah, I feel like it's so easy to want to do that. But I feel like, it probably will always come back and bite you in the butt.
Definitely. And also too, an entry condition report, when you receive it, it is overwhelming. There is a lot of words on there.
Absolutely.
So for me, I'm very specific. It's a white door with perhaps brass handleware, which is a little bit tarnished, and there is many indents to the door jamb, or there's carpet and it's been professionally cleaned, only furniture indents. There's a lot of words on an entry condition report, so I can totally understand and relate that you'd look at that and go, oh my God, I really haven't got the time to do this right now. I'm just going to quickly look through it. But it's, taking the time will definitely cover yourself. But I mean, having said that, definitely important to do it. But again, if you've got a different property manager, different set of eyes, they may interpret things differently. But if you've gone through it and taken the time to add your comments and there's been that follow-up as well, then you're putting yourself in the best position to have at least a bit more understanding when the vacate inspection has been done.
I think my first property that I moved into when I was 18 is, I think, a perfect example of this because having worked in real estate very briefly, I kind of knew, I was like, it's important that we look at this entry condition
Yeah.
report because I've seen people, you know, the consequence of not doing it.
Yeah.
And so we went through and we added stuff and we made sure we looked really closely at stuff. And like we got all of our bond back, which was quite lucky because we probably, in terms of maintenance of the property, weren't the best tenants. So we put in flower beds that were in tires.
Yep.
That went crazy. We put those in. We got a cat who scratched the carpets, who scratched the walls.
Yes.
And we had to sand it, paint it,
Yeah.
plaster it.
Yeah.
We had to like cut all the little pulls that were out of the carpet out. We had him throw up on the carpet once or twice. We had him pee on the carpet once or twice. We also had a bird at one point. We were so young and chaotic.
Yep.
We had a bird at one point who would climb up the screens in the windows and
So
put
the
little
screens
holes
would
in
be
it.
pitted. Yeah.
Yep. And so we had to replace all the screens before we left, albeit with worse screens, to be honest.
Yeah,
But ones that weren't holy.
Yeah.
So like, we also had someone come in and punch a hole in a wall.
Yeah.
So we had to get that fixed
That's right.
as well.
Your responsibility,
So
unfortunately.
like, yeah, but like, I guess, so from an owner point of view, we probably weren't the best. We were young. But then we still managed to get all of our bond back because with every single one of those things that happened, I mean, obviously it wasn't on the entry condition report, but I guess we owned all of it and we said, hey, look, this happened.
Yes.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
We want to fix it in XYZ way. And they were usually like, that's fair enough, just fix it.
Yeah.
And we did, and then we got all of our bond back. So
Exactly,
I think,
yeah.
but obviously, little things that we added at the very start in the entry condition, obviously that was all covered and fine.
Yeah.
But just things happen that you cannot
Yeah.
anticipate though.
That's
So
right,
like,
yeah.
I guess it also comes back to like, as much as you want to lie and exaggerate things, someone might come in and punch a hole in your wall.
Yeah.
And you can't pretend that that was there before.
No, you can't.
So like, yeah, you just have to own up to stuff and fix it.
It comes back to that accountability, like we were saying last
you'd
episode.
think that we would have had our bond just ripped away because they had enough reason to. But perhaps we were just lucky with who we had running our property, or it's because of, you know, how we behaved with everything.
I think,
But in either case, we got it back.
I
so.
think though, there's, because you had accountability. Not all. So it's not a given that when you vacate you can go back and rectify anything. Once you hand in your keys, you are subconsciously saying, we are done with the property, here it is. So when we do our vacate, if there's things that are different or the cleaning is not up to scratch, you don't have the right to go back. It is up to the owner to allow you to go back. Not all owners will allow that. Some will. It also comes down to the agency. If the cleaning is that bad and that's your effort, probably a good idea to get a professional cleaner in to finish it off so it's up to our standard. Otherwise, you may have to go back 2 or 3 times to get it up to scratch. And we do that in the essence of save yourself some time. Yes, it's going to cost you some money, but it's going to be done once. There's going to be an invoice for it, and then it's up to our standard as opposed to losing time of you having to go back because more often than not, you're working. You can't get there during the day, so it's a night thing. You might not get everything. We have to go back and re-inspect. If it's not up to scratch, we need you to come back again.
Yep.
A whole week could go past, and that's a loss of rent for the owner while it's not being tenanted again.
Yep.
So sometimes, yes, it's a pain to have to pay for it, but really having a professional go in and do it, it saves you time and effort. Because if you have to go back 3-4 times, that's maybe 1 or 2 hours each time that you might want to be sitting at home Netflix binging or something.
Exactly.
So it's, again, time is currency.
It is. And I know a lot of bond cleaners will often offer to come back at no extra cost.
Yeah, they have a guarantee.
Because they understand they sometimes miss things themselves. And so that's fairly good value for your money that you're getting because they're going to make sure the job is
correct.
done.
But in that circumstance, if you do engage a bond cleaner, only pay half and then pay the other half once the vacate has been completed and there's no issues. Because otherwise some bond cleaners will not go back, and in which case then you have to go back or the agency engages another bond cleaner. So you end up paying more.
Yep.
Bond cleaners are going to hate me saying that, but it's just to safeguard yourself.
Yep.
But any good bond cleaner will understand that their workmanship is hinging on the vacate inspection being completed and everything being passed. Some agencies have their own preferred bond cleaners, to which case definitely try and use those because the bond cleaner knows the standard that the agency is expecting every time. So then you've got a very good chance that they won't have to go back because they will have done everything correctly.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Excuse me. So I think that's really good to kind of consider, because I think a lot of people would just sort of get the entry condition report in the emails and be like, oh, huge document, whatever, I'll send it back.
It's also the excitement. I've just got my keys. I'm so excited to move into the house. And sometimes, hand the keys over and you're already there with the truck ready to move your stuff in.
Yes.
It's I know it's exciting. It's a new chapter, but do the admin first.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we'll be having a conversation when you vacate, which, for an hour or 2 hours to go through it, it saves so much hassle at the end for you.
Definitely. Rightio. We might take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll have a look more into routine inspections.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Right, what a fantastic break. How was your break, Elizabeth?
Great.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Welcome back. So, entry condition reports, as we know, super important. But I want to go into a little bit more about routine inspections. So pretty much everything that happens between the start and the finish point there. And from what I've heard from both sides of this argument, tenants hate them because you're going into their house, they have to make it clean, all this stuff. And then I know agents hate them because they have to go do them. And it's one of their least favourite parts of the day, at least from what I've heard.
Yeah.
And so I guess a lot of people would be interested in, like, what routine inspections are really for and what you look for in them and how they can make sure that they go really smoothly for both sides.
Yeah, of course. Routine inspections can be a pain for both tenants and property managers, but they are really important. So in terms of when you move in, legislation allows us as an agency to go in as early as 10 weeks after you've moved into the property. That's a really good gauge for us, and then into 4 times in a year, including that 10-week mark. That's the legislation. So, but it's up to each agency whether they go in that many times. I personally don't think you need to go into a property every 3 months. If you've got a great tenant, why do you need to go back every 3 months? I stretch mine to 6 to see how everything's going, if there's any maintenance. But the main reason why we do routine inspections is to just check that everything's okay. Check especially the flexi hoses under the kitchen sink and in the bathrooms, because if they have a little bit of rust on them, they can self-implode and then you've got a water leak. So it's something we check every time we come. So if we have the opportunity, we won't open anything of yours, but we have the right to open up a built-in to check if there's any water leaks in the ceiling in that area. To check in the cupboards, especially under kitchen sinks, under the laundry tub to make sure those taps are all okay, because you're using them all the time. You don't necessarily look in there on a day-to-day basis and check, feeling the flexi hoses, they're all good, no cracks, no leakage. If one of those goes, that's a massive undertaking. Insurance is involved. Potentially you can't use that space while all of that work's being repaired. So for us just to come in and check it, take some photos and just touch those, if there's any rust on them, we'll just get them replaced. Also too, it's just to check that everything's okay in the house. So making sure windows aren't broken, that the number of occupants on the lease, the number of people living at the property, checking that you don't have a dog.
A secret dog, at least.
Yeah. And, if you have a dog and you haven't told your real estate and then we go to the property and there's a dog bowl, it's like, woohoo, something's going on here. So little things like that, but it's checking to make sure fence lines are all okay, there's no trees that have fallen down. It's just general upkeep of the property, but also too, it's looking at what does it need? Are the ceiling fans are they badly aged? Are the the blades really pitted? Is that something we can look at in this financial year of just going through and replacing them? So there's preventative maintenance in that sense as well. We understand that we're entering your home. We do check to a degree a level of cleanliness. So it's not about the dishes on the sink. It's whether you're doing a wipe over of the window sills. If you've got a build up on the ceiling fans of heavy, heavy dust, that's going to increase the pitting of the blade, which then means that owner may have to replace that ceiling fan a lot quicker than if it was cleaned regularly. Little things like that. Or if the window screens are really heavily pitted, or we get there and a sliding screen door is absolutely demolished from your animal or from a potential break-in or something like that, we want to get on top of those things. Also, too, it's to check if there's any damage. So if there has been a situation where someone's punched a hole in a wall, or a child has accidentally run into and dragged something down the wall and there's a massive indent along there, we will note all of that and then we'll help you sort that before you vacate, because leaving things right to the end only means there's going to be more conflict at the end. So if we get it done, get a handyman in to patch, repaint, do whatever, negotiate quotes, things like that, it's better off to get those things done before you vacate.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And checking too, like making sure that the water meter's okay, that, there's not a really green area of your grass that potentially is a water leak or damage to underground piping.
Oh, that's interesting.
We look at all of those things and making sure, yes, that you're mowing the lawns regularly, that your dog hasn't made this massive track line from where it's just been running backwards and forwards on the fence line. So little things like that, so that if and when you ever leave, it's not such a massive undertaking as well when you leave. These are little things that you can chip away at over the remainder of your lease, or we have conversations with you about, okay, you just need to keep on top of that. So there's many, many benefits of the routine. And it's an indicator for the owner to see how you're looking after it. We understand that in between the inspections, it may not be that pristine, but it's also an opportunity for you to have a bit of a deep clean, clean your aircon filters, that kind of thing, because if we went a whole 12 months and we didn't look at your property, there's probably a lot of things that will have to have a little bit of extra attention after that 12 months. So yes, we are coming in and we're not with white gloves or anything like that anymore. It's just a general walk around, just making sure everything is working, to reaffiliate ourselves with the house, just to double check that everything's okay. Yes, you have a bit of a deep clean on the property, which is not a bad thing either.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think something else that tenants really get confused by is like, what things are their responsibility to fix and maintain, and what things are the owner's responsibility? And is it purely just what the lease says? Is there specific things that are consistent?
Look, it's I don't know that we've got long enough to really go into everything.
Fair enough, yeah.
But there's a lot of things. Like if you damage something, obviously you still need to report that you've damaged it, so then we know, and then we can help you with respective tradespeople to fix it. If it's a leaking tap, then yes, definitely report it. That is a wear and tear, a maintenance issue for an owner.
Sort of like normal living, sort of wear and tear.
Yeah, definitely. Right. But yeah, if you physically damage something, then obviously it's on you. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
But the same thing like in way of reporting maintenance. So the general tenancy agreement states in there that it's your responsibility as a tenant to report maintenance as soon as you notice or as soon as you see that it's not working. So let's say, for example, you notice on Wednesday or Tuesday that your hot water is starting to get a little bit lukewarm, and then suddenly on Friday it's cold. If you ring me at 4:30 on a Friday and you've known since Tuesday or Wednesday that it's been on the out, I'm going to say to you, you can wait till Monday and we'll have an electrician come on Monday to fix that for you, because you haven't reported it when you first noticed it. And I know maybe you might not get until Thursday and go, oh, that's a little bit light on. It's not as hot as it used to be. Ring me, email me, and then I can get onto it, because otherwise at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, it then turns into most likely an after hours call out, which the owner is not going to be impressed to pay because you failed to report it as soon as you first noticed it. So really important for that. just report something as soon as you see it. I know life takes over sometimes, but even just shooting me an email on Outlook, not necessarily through our normal CRM system, just let me know, and then I can sort it on my end and ask you some more troubleshooting questions of what it could possibly be. So same thing like if you lose power, go to the meter box and it will trip the power because you've got the safety switch there.
Yep.
But before you do that, unplug all of your appliances, because if your Kmart kettle or toaster trips the power and I send a Sparky out there and they've determined that, you have to pay that call out. You've got to pay that electricity bill, or that electrician's call out cost, because that's your appliance. It's not a fault of the actual property's electricity.
Right.
And it's not, unless that power point is faulty, which the electrician will determine. But if it's your appliance, you have to pay for that. So sometimes doing that troubleshooting with me on the phone or with your property manager saves a lot of time and effort and your back pocket in the long run.
It's so funny. One time I had like a similar issue to that, because I had a vacuum that was plugged into one specific socket, and we thought for so long that the vacuum was broken, and we almost went and got a new one, but it was actually the socket that was broken, so we tried to plug in multiple things and stuff. So yes, troubleshoot things.
Yes.
Don't go out and buy a new vacuum.
Yeah,
You never know, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Right, so we've spoken entry reports, we've spoken routine inspections, and I suppose we can jump to the very end now of your tenancy, and so that's your vacating report.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what that does, how it relates to everything else. Go for it.
So with the vacate, going back to the importance of that entry condition report and how much detail you put onto that, ultimately once you've given your notice, we will go in. We've got, an agency has 3 days to do that exit report for you. When you give your notice, hopefully your agency gives you a blank exit condition report, because you have the opportunity to go through that, add anything that might be different from your entry. Not all tenants do it, and it's one of those, it's an optional thing to do. You don't have to, because we have to do the exit report. Right. So we will go through the property using your entry condition report that you have or haven't returned. If you have returned it, fantastic. We'll just go room by room, what we've written, what you've written, and compare it to the current state of the room. And then at the end of it, we have all the photos, any differences, if there's cleaning issues. We note all of that on the exit report or vacate report, depending how you want to call it. Same. What we do with that then, we also read the water meter, so we can determine how much water you've used, depending on what your agreement states, depends on how much you pay. From there, that report and photos get sent to the owner. We summarise all the differences, not the cleaning stuff, because, we write that there's cleaning, but that's a given that has to be sorted depending on what the entry condition report says. It's more about the differences of the condition in terms of damage, or, if there might be 6 chips in a tile and now there's 25. So we also have to take into consideration fair wear and tear of how long you've been at the property. So if you've only been in there 6 months and the property looks like you've been in there for 5 years, that's a little bit of a worry. We will then talk to the owner. We will send you a copy of the report. It may not be on that first day after we've done the inspection. I like to email a tenant and say, we've been to the property, we have noticed some differences, we've sent the report to the owner, we are waiting their instructions on what they want to do with the differences. Yeah. And then once we have confirmation of what they want to dispute with you, we may update the exit report and send you a full copy. It's best practice to send you a full copy so you can see what we're talking about. If you don't receive a copy, that's a worry, because how do you know then what we're talking about?
Yep.
So again, it comes down to that transparency, everybody being on the same page. So from there, again, like I mentioned before, it's not your right to go back to rectify anything. It's up to the owner. And anything on that report, we have discussions. It's the vacate time, as I said before, is quite a stressful, emotional time, especially when we're talking about the bond. And moving's expensive, and you need to refill your accounts because it's cost so much. But don't bank on that bond being back to you really quickly. So if there's issues with the bond and the tenant or myself put a claim on that bond, that whole process of getting it back can be anywhere from a week to 3 months. It just depends how all the negotiations go. So don't expect you're going to get the money the next day.
Yep.
Unless, it could happen if your vacate has been fantastic. But if not, if there are differences, the bond doesn't go anywhere until everybody's in agreement or QCAT decide what happens with that bond.
I suppose that would be extra stressful too, is if you're relying on that bond to pay for the bond of your next property that you're moving into.
Yeah, so when you are approved for a property, you have to pay the bond and the 2 weeks rent up front.
Yep.
There has been some changes in legislation to allow partial splits or transfers. Any good agency is not going to allow that. It's going to be you pay a full bond up front because it's a risk, because otherwise we've got no way. Once you've got keys to that property, we've got no way or no leverage over you to get that balance from you. We can issue with a notice to remedy breach, but then if you don't do that, then we've got to go through the whole process of getting you out. So no agency, I don't think, will ever do a transfer, because then we're only left with half a bond, which is only 2 weeks rent, which is not enough to cover any damages, or it's just not enough nowadays. So yeah, the bond, if you move in, even if you're moving to another property within the same agency, they will not do a transfer because you're putting both owners at risk of that. And that's the downside, I suppose, of renting. You run that risk of having to move from one property to another. You have to save the money. It's very tough.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess, it's just really important to make sure that you've got money for that bond up front and the 2 weeks before you're able to move out.
Correct,
Yep.
yeah. So it's generally a question that we will ask you at the application stage. Do you have 6 weeks ready to go?
Yep.
If you don't, there are ways you can do it through Department of Housing, but that's means tested. So they can do a bond loan for you through Department of Housing, and sometimes they will give you the first 2 weeks rent as well, depending on your circumstances. So that can be a saving grace if you meet those criteria to be applicable.
So we've spoken about your entry report, we've spoken about your routine inspections, and we've spoken about the exit report as well. So pretty much every report that we do, you guys do on that property from start to finish.
Correct.
So, which it brings us to the end of our episode, essentially. If we had somebody listening, though, who didn't really want to be bothered to listen to the whole episode and just wanted to skip to this end bit to get the short version, the snappy version.
Yep, a summary.
What would that look like?
Entry condition report, super, super important. Start with the end in mind. So go through it, make sure that you agree with what's written, and if you don't, add your own comments, but you've got to do it within the time frame of 7 days. Routine inspections, keep the house neat and tidy. We will come in, yes, we can do it originally, the original first 10 weeks we can come in, and sometimes every 3 months after that. It just depends on your agency to how often that happens. But just clean things. It's a good chance to just give a little bit of a deep clean, but we also check for maintenance while we're there. So that's the main importance there. And at the end, be open-minded. Give it as good a clean as you can, or engage the professionals to do it to save yourself some angst at the end. We go in, we check everything, and if there's differences, just be receptive to, yes, it might not be exactly as you found it. It might be better, but just be open to communications or conversations about any differences that there may be. And if you've damaged something, be open and upfront about that, so then we can then assist you to sort it. I think that's really, the main points there.
Summary, yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much for chatting with me on this topic. As we know, there's so much back and forth about it, but it's really good to just lay out all the facts and just what needs to happen
Yeah,
to make
thanks
sure
so
things are smooth.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No worries. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. We'll just talk more about all of this stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, see you later.
I wish I knew